Welcome back, everyone. We're all about diving deep here, right?
Mm.
Well, today we're tackling something that might just change how you look at, well, pretty much everything, getting things done, reaching your goals. It's called the 12-week year. And yeah, we're going deep on the book by Brian Moran and Michael Lennington.
We all do it. We set these big New Year's resolutions, those year-long goals. But here's the thing. The 12-week year says that might be why we, sometimes struggle.
Really? I can see how a year is a long time, but why would that be a problem? Wouldn't more time be better? More flexibility and all that?
Well, it might seem that way, but it turns out that having all that time can make us, well, procrastinate.
Yeah.
We think, oh, I've got loads of time. And what happens? We spread ourselves too thin, we try to do too much, and we lose focus.
So instead of a marathon, it's like a bunch of sprints.
Exactly. And the authors have this great point. What often holds us back isn't that we don't know enough or don't have the skills. It's that we just don't execute well.
Yeah.
Too much information, too many options, and then bam, we're all over the place and the results are, well, kind of meh.
Makes sense. It's about making each day count. And this 12-week structure sounds like it really puts that front and center. But how do you actually, take a whole year and chop it up like that?
That's where the magic happens. The 12-week year has these key principles. And the first one is all about having a clear vision, not just for work, but for, your whole life.
I like that. It's not just checking off boxes. It's like, why are we even doing this in the first place?
Exactly. The book has the story about a guy named Sal Durso. His business hit a huge roadblock, but he found inspiration in, get this, fireweed in Alaska. It's a plant that thrives even after like huge fires. And that image helped him like reimagine his whole company, rebuild it even stronger.
Wow, that's powerful. A good analogy can really change how you see things. So it's not just goals, but finding that emotional connection.
And that leads right into planning. You've got to take that big vision and make it real with a 12-week plan, specific objectives, measurable ones. Something you don't always see in those typical yearly plans.
Right. If your goals are fuzzy, how do you even know if you're making progress?
Yeah.
Are there any examples of this in action?
Tons. They talk about Patrick Moran, who used this method, the 12-week year, to get funding for his startup. And this was during a really tough time for the economy, but he did it, laser focus on a short time frame, and boom, got it done.
Impressive. So you've got the vision, you've mapped out the plan, but the real challenge, it seems to me, is actually sticking to it. Life throws curveballs, even in just 12 weeks.
You're telling me. And that's where process control kicks in. It's all about the strategies to make sure you're actually doing what you plan. And one of the coolest tools they have is the weekly scorecard.
A scorecard. So it's not just about what you achieve, but how you're doing each week.
Right. You got it. It shifts the focus to, like, did you complete the actions you planned? The goal is at least 85% each week. So you're not just looking at the outcome, but the consistency of your efforts.
That makes a lot of sense. But what about those days when you just don't feel like doing anything?
That's where having an accountability partner can be a game changer. And get this, it's not just a good idea, there's science behind it. We included this article from Fast Company, and they talked about research showing that people who have support, like a group or a buddy, they're way more likely to make changes stick.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's easier to stay motivated when you're not alone, sharing the journey with someone, getting that boost when you need it.
The article actually mentioned a study with patients trying to change their lifestyles. Pretty big stuff. And the ones who had a support group, they did way better. It's like you're sharing experiences and you've got that extra push.
Not just someone to pat you on the back, but to give you a little nudge when you're slipping. But even with all that support, how do you actually find the time? Our schedules are already packed.
And that's why time blocking is so powerful. It's about scheduling those strategic activities, those things that really matter, and treating them like, I don't know, a meeting with a client, something you can't miss.
So you're basically making appointments with yourself for those important tasks so they don't just get lost in the day-to-day chaos. Any examples of this in the book?
Oh, yeah, they talk about this guy, Adam Black. He used a simple daily scorecard to track his key activities, and with time blocking, he saw a 65% increase in sales. It's crazy what happens when you actually make time for what matters.
Intentional with your time,
Uh,
not just letting it slip away. But even with systems and support, there's still that inner battle, right? That voice saying, maybe skip it today. How do you overcome that?
that's where commitment really comes in. It's the next key principle, and it's about making a conscious choice, holding yourself accountable no matter what, even if you don't feel like it.
Because let's face it, some days you just wake up and the motivation is gone. How do you build that kind of deep commitment?
The book breaks it down into four things. First, you've got to really want it, strong desire. Then you need to figure out those key actions, the things that will get you there, and be real about the costs involved. But the big one, the most important one, is acting on your commitment even when you just don't feel like it.
That's a tough one. But I get it. Actions speak louder than words, especially to ourselves.
They tell this really heartwarming story about Mick White. He committed to calling his mom every single weekday, and guess what? He ended up having hundreds of these amazing conversations with her before she passed away unexpectedly.
Wow, that really hits home. Small commitments, but consistent action. And it makes all the difference. Makes you think about what really matters.
Exactly. Commitment isn't just about achieving something, it's about living a life that's aligned with your values.
I like that. So we've got vision, planning, process control, and commitment. But isn't there a danger of getting, I don't know, too obsessed with being perfect? What happens when you hit a roadblock?
That's where excellence in every moment comes in. It's about realizing that being great isn't about one big finish line, it's about the little choices you make every single day.
Being present in each moment, not just fixated on the end goal.
They use Michael Phelps as an example, the Olympic swimmer.
Hmm.
He didn't just win medals, he made choices in his training day after day, even when it was hard. And those choices led to the victories.
It's a good reminder that success is built on those little disciplines, not just those bursts of motivation we all get sometimes.
Right, and we can't talk about growth without talking about change. Embracing change, that's another key principle of the 12-week year.
Change can be exciting, but also scary.
Yeah.
How does the book recommend dealing with all the ups and downs?
Well, they talk about the emotional cycle of change. It starts with that initial excitement, that's uninformed optimism. Then comes a reality check, that's informed pessimism, which can sometimes lead to, the valley of despair.
Ugh, yeah, I've been there.
Well,
Sounds like it's not about avoiding those tough moments, but figuring out how to get through them.
exactly. If you keep going, you get to informed optimism and finally success and fulfillment. If you know the cycle, you can ride the waves of change instead of getting wiped out.
So you're saying those doubts are normal, not a sign to quit. Do they give any real-life examples of someone who's been through this?
Oh, yeah. They talk about Annette Batista. She used the 12-week year to achieve her career goals, and at the same time, she was transitioning to homeschooling her son.
Wow, that's a lot. So she used this to manage all those big changes.
Yep. She really stuck to the principles and routines. It shows how adaptable this method can be, and her story shows how important it is to focus on improving consistently instead of trying to be perfect.
That's encouraging, especially when you're going through transitions. But what about those times when you really hit a wall? How do you push through that valley of despair?
The book says you've got to tap into your desire, your commitment. When you start doubting, remember why you're doing this in the first place. Let that be your fuel.
So it's not just about the plan, but about having a strong enough reason to stick with it when things get tough.
You got it. And that leads us to one of the biggest traps people fall into, the busy trap.
The busy trap. I think we've all been there. What does that even mean?
It's when you're so busy doing that you lose sight of the things that actually matter. Those things that will move you closer to your goals. It's like running on a treadmill. Lots of effort, but you're not going anywhere.
Ugh, I know that feeling. How do you avoid that?
The book says you have to be ruthless with your time, your energy. Prioritize the tasks that have the biggest impact. Time blocking is your friend here. Make sure you're making time for those high-value activities.
So it's about making conscious choices, not just reacting to whatever comes up.
Exactly. And then there's fear and self-doubt, another trap that can hold us back.
Oh, yeah, that inner critic is always lurking. How do we silence those voices and actually get things done?
The authors say fear is normal, part of the process, but it can't be allowed to stop us. It's about recognizing those fears and moving forward anyway.
I know, but that's easier said than done. Any tips for dealing with those moments of self-doubt?
They suggest thinking of fear as a sign that you're on the right track. If you're scared, it might mean you're stepping outside your comfort zone, you're growing.
Interesting way to look at it. So it's not a stop sign, more like a signpost that you're heading in the right direction. But sometimes I think those fears are tied to feeling overwhelmed by, I don't know, how big our goals are.
Oh, for sure. And that's why the book talks about breaking down those huge goals into smaller steps. Those bite-sized actions can build momentum, and pretty soon you're not feeling so overwhelmed anymore.
So it's not about being perfect right away, but about making progress, even if it's a little bit every day.
Yep. And then there's that trap we all fall into sometimes, comparing ourselves to others, and then bam, we feel discouraged.
The comparison game. Social media doesn't help, does it?
And
How do you avoid getting sucked into that?
the authors remind us that we're all on our own journey. Focus on your own progress, not what other people are doing. Celebrate your wins, even the small ones, and let that fuel you.
It's like running your own race, right?
Yeah.
Stay focused on your lane. But with all this talk about productivity and goals, we can't forget that we're not machines. We need to take care of ourselves too, right?
Absolutely. The book talks a lot about self care. If you want to perform at your best, you've got to take care of your body and your mind. Sleep, good food, and things that bring you joy.
Rest and recovery just as important as hard work.
Exactly. When you're burned out, you're not going to be productive anyway. So build self care into your plan just like you would any other important activity.
So it's about making choices that support your well-being so you can actually keep going.
Right. Now, there's one more pitfall that trips people up:
Hmm.
overcomplicating things.
Oh yeah, I can see that happening. You get so lost in the details that you forget what you're even trying to do.
That's why the authors remind us that the 12-week year is a framework, not a set of rules you have to follow perfectly. Find what works for you.
So be flexible, experiment a bit.
Exactly. And sometimes those experiments lead to the best discoveries.
This has been a great deep dive into the first part of the 12-week year. We've covered a lot, from those key principles to the things that can trip us up. What are the main things you want our listener to take away from this?
I think the biggest thing is the 12-week year isn't just about managing time, it's a change in how you think. It's about taking charge of your time, focusing on what you're good at, and taking action consistently. And when you do that, you can achieve way more than you thought possible.
I love that. It's about moving from hoping to doing, giving yourself the tools to make it happen.
And one of the most empowering parts of this whole thing is that it tells you to focus on your strengths, not on trying to fix all your weaknesses.
That's a big one, right? It's about recognizing that we all have unique talents, and real success comes from using them.
And that fits perfectly with the 12-week year because it's all about figuring out those actions that really play to your strengths.
So instead of trying to be good at everything, you double down on what you're already good at.
Exactly. And that brings us to a question for our listener. What's your unique ability? What do you do best and actually enjoy doing?
It's like figuring out your superpower and then asking yourself, how can I use that power in the next 12 weeks to make something incredible happen?
Something to think about as you start your own 12-week year journey.
It's all about recognizing the power you already have and using it to create the life you want. Now, before we jump into the next part of our deep dive, I want you to really think about that question. What's your unique strength? How can you use it to make something amazing happen in the next 12 weeks? We'll be back soon to explore more from the 12-week year, and we'll talk about how to actually apply these principles to your life in a way that really makes a difference. Stay tuned.
So, welcome back. I'm really excited to get into this next part of the 12-week year because it's not just about personal goals. It can totally transform how teams and, whole organizations work.
Oh, that's interesting. I hear a lot about companies struggling to get everyone on the same page, especially with those long-term goals. So how does the 12-week year help with that?
Well, one of the key things for organizations is creating a culture of accountability where everyone feels like they own their work, and they're empowered to do their best.
So it's moving away from that, like, boss tells you what to do thing and more towards a team effort.
Exactly. The book talks about collective vision, which means involving everyone in figuring out the goals, the big picture, and that creates a shared purpose and everyone's more committed.
Makes sense. If people feel like their ideas matter, they're more likely to, really care about the company's success.
And that collective vision, it's not just a slogan. The book says it should be detailed, inspiring, something that everyone can connect with, emotional even. It's about getting the whole team excited about the future.
So it's not just targets, it's painting a picture of what success actually looks like, feels like for everyone. But once you have that vision, how do you make it happen?
Well, that's where the 12-week year planning process comes in. Just like with personal goals, break down those big long-term goals into smaller, measurable objectives for each 12-week period.
Yeah, that makes sense. Those shorter time frames create that sense of urgency. But it's super important that everyone on the team understands those objectives.
Well,
how do they recommend doing that?
They talk about process control at the organizational level. So you need clear systems to track progress and hold everyone accountable, both individuals and teams.
So, like regular check ins, performance reviews, things like that.
Yeah, but not as a way to, punish people. It's about feedback and getting better all the time. Create a culture of learning where mistakes are seen as opportunities to grow.
I like that. It takes the pressure off, and people can be more, I don't know, experimental, more innovative. But it's not just about finding areas to improve, it's also about celebrating the wins,
Right,
right?
absolutely. The book really emphasizes celebrating successes, big and small. It's about recognizing everyone's effort, making people feel appreciated.
Because when people feel valued, they're more motivated,
Right.
and that helps the whole organization.
Totally. It's a positive feedback loop. And clear communication is a big part of that. Keeping that culture of accountability and continuous improvement going.
Yeah, communication is key.
Hmm.
What kind of communication practices do they suggest?
They talk about feedback loops within the organization, making sure everyone knows about progress, challenges, successes. That builds trust and transparency.
Transparency is so important. It helps everyone feel like they're part of the journey, not just working their own little bubble. But let's be real, change can be tough. People resist it. How does the 12-week year deal with that?
Well, the book says that as leaders, it's our job to guide our teams through those ups and downs of change, offer support, encouragement. We need to create a culture where change is seen as part of growth, not something to be afraid of.
So it's about creating a safe space to experiment, to learn, knowing it's okay to mess up, as long as you keep moving forward. But even with the best intentions, there are going to be bumps along the way. What are some of the common mistakes that organizations make when they try to implement the 12-week year?
One of the biggest ones is the busy trap. Just like individuals, teams can get so caught up in those day to day tasks that they lose sight of the bigger picture, the strategic activities that really matter.
So the organization is running on a treadmill,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. And the solution, just like for individuals, is prioritizing. Focus on those high impact tasks that will actually make a difference. The book says leaders need to help their teams be really, really choosy with their time and energy, making sure they're spending it on the right things.
So cut through the noise, focus on what matters.
Exactly. And one way to do that is time blocking. Teams can schedule those blocks of time for those important activities and protect that time from distractions.
Like a sacred space for focused work, even in a crazy busy organization. But sometimes it's not just about time, it's about mindset. Fear and self doubt can be just as paralyzing for a team as it is for a person, right?
Absolutely. The authors acknowledge that fear is normal, especially when you're trying something new, something big, but they say don't let fear stop you.
Right. But how do you encourage a team to move forward when they're scared, especially when it comes to taking risks, trying new things?
The book says to think of fear as a sign that you're on the right track. If you're feeling it, maybe it means you're pushing boundaries, you're growing.
I like that. It's a good way to reframe it. Fear isn't a stop sign, it's a sign that you're moving in the right direction. But sometimes, even if a team is motivated and ready for change, those goals can just feel too big. How do you help them break those down into smaller pieces?
Well, just like with individual goals, the book talks about breaking those big goals into smaller steps. It makes them less scary, and you get that sense of accomplishment along the way.
So you celebrate those little wins, those milestones that show you're making progress.
Exactly. And it's important to create a culture where those small wins are recognized, celebrated.
Mm.
It reinforces the idea that progress is happening, even if you can't always see the big picture yet. But, there's another trap that can really mess things up for teams, and it's something we see a lot these days.
What's that?
Comparing yourself to other teams, other companies, you see their success and you get discouraged.
The comparison trap. It's everywhere. It's easy to get caught up in what everyone else is doing and forget about your own strengths.
Right. And just like with individuals, the key is to focus on your own journey, celebrate your wins, and remember that every team is different.
Tune out the noise, stay true to your own vision, your own strategy. But with all this focus on goals and progress, it's easy to forget about the people, right? How does the 12-week year deal with taking care of your team?
Well, just like with individual self care, the book talks about self care for the whole team. People are your most valuable asset, so their well being is crucial.
So it's not just about pushing for results, it's about creating a culture that supports people.
Exactly. Create an environment where people feel okay taking breaks, setting boundaries, prioritizing their health, both mental and physical. Rest and recovery are just as important as working hard.
It's about a sustainable pace, not just burning everyone out. But even when teams have good intentions, sometimes they overcomplicate things.
Oh, for sure. And the book reminds us that the 12-week year is a framework, not a set of rules. Find what worked for your team, adapt it to your needs.
So flexibility and experimentation are key.
Exactly. And that's where leadership matters. Empower your teams, let them experiment, track their results, and make changes as they go. It's all about continuous improvement.
So the 12-week year isn't just about hitting certain goals. It's about creating a culture that's adaptable, resilient.
That's a great way to put it. It's about creating an environment where teams can thrive, be innovative, and handle whatever comes their way. And a big part of that is recognizing and celebrating what makes each team member unique, their strengths.
It reminds me of what we talked about earlier, focusing on strengths instead of weaknesses. How does that apply to teams?
Well, just like individuals have strengths, teams have collective strengths based on what everyone brings to the table. The 12-week year encourages leaders to figure out those team strengths and use them to achieve amazing things.
So you build on those strengths, and the team becomes more than just the sum of its parts. But how do you actually figure out those strengths and then, help them grow?
That's a great question, and one we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. We'll talk about specific ways to identify those team strengths, how to get people working together effectively, and how to create a culture where those strengths can really shine.
Can't wait to hear more. This next part sounds like it's going to give our listeners some really practical tools and insights for using the 12-week year framework with their own teams. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back. So we've been talking about the 12-week year, how it can work for personal goals, and how it can really boost teams and whole organizations. But I'm still curious about how you actually unlock those collective strengths, the ones we were talking about before. Where do you even start?
Well, you have to start by recognizing that teams have strengths, just like individuals do, right? It's all those talents and abilities that everyone brings together. And one of the simplest ways to figure those out is just to ask.
So just have a conversation. Everyone shares what they're good at, what they like doing. Sounds easy, but I bet there's more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely an art to making those conversations really work. The book talks about using things like strengths assessments, personality tests, those kinds of things that can help people understand their strengths better, on a deeper level.
I've seen those used, but sometimes they can feel kind of, I don't know, generic.
Mm.
How do you make sure those results actually help the team?
That's where a good leader or facilitator comes in. They can help the team understand those results in the context of their work, their goals.
So it's not just about labeling people like, oh, you're the creative one, you're the analytical one. It's about figuring out how those strengths can help the whole team succeed.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that strengths can change, they evolve, and new strengths can pop up as people learn and grow.
So it's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing process. Okay, so you've got a good idea of the team's strengths. Now what? How do you actually use them, make sure they're being used well?
That's where that 12-week year planning process really shines. When you're setting those goals and objectives, the leaders should really think about how those goals match up with the team's strengths.
So you're not just assigning tasks randomly. You're thinking strategically, putting people in roles that play to their strengths.
Right. And when you do that, you get better results, and people are more engaged, more motivated. When they're doing something they enjoy and they're good at, they care more about the outcome.
It's like a win-win. Success builds on itself.
Hmm.
But I imagine it's not always easy to find that perfect match, right? What happens when there's a task that no one's strengths really fit?
That's when you can use stretch assignments. The book suggests that sometimes it's good to challenge people a bit. Give them tasks that might push them outside their comfort zone, even if it doesn't seem like a perfect fit at first.
So it's about encouraging growth, even when you're focusing on strengths. But doesn't that risk like overwhelming people or setting them up to fail?
That's where careful planning and support are so important. If you give someone a stretch assignment, you need to give them the resources, training, and mentoring they need to succeed.
You're creating a safe space where it's okay to try things, make mistakes, learn from them.
Exactly. And sometimes those stretch assignments can uncover hidden talents, new strengths that you didn't even know were there. It makes the team even stronger.
That's cool. But focusing on strengths isn't just about tasks, it's also about the whole culture, right?
Yeah.
Creating an environment where people feel like they can use their strengths, work together. How do you do that?
The book talks about psychological safety. That means creating a space where people feel comfortable sharing their ideas, even if they're a little out there, even if they challenge the way things are usually done.
So it's okay to take risks, think differently, not be afraid to make mistakes.
Exactly. And when you have that kind of environment, you get more innovation, more creativity. The team can really reach its full potential. But there's another piece to this puzzle, creating a collaborative culture.
What's that?
It's about celebrating diversity, recognizing that everyone has unique perspectives, experiences. That's so valuable.
Because a team with different perspectives can solve problems better, be more creative.
Exactly. And when people feel appreciated for who they are, what they bring to the table, they're more engaged, more motivated.
So it's not just about individual strengths, it's about making all those strengths work together.
Yes. And the 12-week year gives you a structure for doing that. You set clear goals, track your progress, and take time to reflect on what's working, what's not. That way, teams can keep getting better at using their strengths.
It's a journey, right? Always discovering, growing, collaborating. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the 12-week year, what's the one thing you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing is that the 12-week year is not just about being more productive. It's a whole new way of thinking about your life, how you live it both personally and professionally. It's about being intentional, finding more
It's
fulfillment.
about taking control, right? Your time, your goals, your strengths,
Yeah.
and then using all of that to create something amazing.
And it doesn't matter if you're using it for yourself, your team, or your whole company. The 12-week year can help you achieve incredible things.
This has been such a great exploration of the 12-week year. We've covered so much, from the basic ideas to how you can actually use it. I really encourage you, our listener, to take a closer look at this method and see how it can change the way you approach your goals. Think about what you could achieve in your next 12 weeks. It's pretty exciting, right? Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.